So this talk is about coming back from loss, replacing bees and coming back from loss. And that's just a fact of beekeeping. I like to tell people that there's only two absolutes in beekeeping. That if you keep bees, you will get stung. There's just no avoiding that. And once in a while, I'll have somebody to say in a group, say, well, I've got a cousin that his grandfather's had bees all his life and he's never been stung. It's never anybody actually there that's never been stung. There's always, I know somebody that has a kinfolk that they kept bees all their life and they've never been stung. They don't ever wear a suit. They don't ever have a smoker or anything. They never get stung. And I just think, well, bless them, you know. A person that's kept bees and has never been stung will eventually begin to believe that they're the real bee whisperer and the bees actually love them. Your bees don't love you. They survive in spite of you, but they don't love you. And when you finally do get stung, it's going to be pretty spectacular. You know, if you think that they really love you and they're never going to sting you. But I can't see everybody, and that makes me nervous. When I can't see Mike Mabry, I'm afraid he's plotting against me. But the second absolute is sooner or later your bees are going to die. You're going to think that this hive is a super hive and going to live forever, and you'll go out there the next spring preparing to make a split from it, and you'll realize that kind of like Teresa Martin's book, you know, dead bees don't make honey. Well, you can't make a split from a dead hive. It's hard to raise queens with the dead bees, and I raise several queens every year, and it takes a live hive. But that's why it's important to understand. Number one, understand that you will lose bees, because some people, it's a real emotional hit when they go out to the bee yard and they feel like a failure. If your bees die, you are not a failure. You're normal. Well, maybe not. You're a beekeeper, so I can't say normal. But for a beekeeper, you're normal. You're in the 99.99% percentile of people that have had bees, and some of them died. Having bad things to happen with your bees, and in life in general, but especially with bees, that's not the problem. Having bad things happen and then letting that cycle repeat itself and repeat itself and repeat itself and never fixing it, that's the problem. And even worse than that is not knowing how to come back from it. If you lose your bees, of course, losing bees, it's a matter of semantics. I was having a meal with Richard 80 a few years ago, and Richard at that time was credited with being the largest beekeeper in the world. And it's probably 20 years ago. And there was a fellow that came and was speaking with him, and he said, "Mr. 80, how many hives do you have?" And Richard said, "Oh, last count, I think I had about 140,000. And this fellow said, "Well, my goodness, that's a lot of hives." And he said, "Yes, sir, it is." Well, they spoke a little more small talk, and the fellow left. And Richard has had a lot of their bees at a place called Woodville, Mississippi, which was not too far from where we had a couple of bee yards. It's about 60 miles from where some of our bees were. And I told him, I said, "Richard, I didn't know how many hives you were up to now." I said, "That's pretty impressive." And he said, "Well, I'm not sure how many of them have bees in them." And I just realized I was a lot bigger beekeeper than I thought I was. I had a lot of hives, but some of them didn't have bees in them. But you don't really lose bees. You know where they are. You just know they're all dead. You know, there's a big pile of dead bees out there. I didn't lose them. There they are. But how do you come back from that? Well, there's several different ways that you can come back from that. Only one of them is sustainable. The most immediate way that you can come back is buying bees. And there's no sin in buying bees. If you need to buy bees to get your numbers back up, okay, buy bees. Make sure you like the genetics. If you don't like the genetics, you don't like what they're doing, change them as soon as possible. As soon as you realize that I'm not particularly happy with the way these bees act when I'm working through them. And what you'll notice, I mean, the most irritating thing for me with bees is when I pull a frame out of the middle of the brood nest. It's got larvae on it, got bees on it, and the bees all just run off to the corner and jump off either in the grass or down into the hive. That's a severe case of being nervous on the comb. That's what used to be called. Well, I'm just not going to put up with that. I want to change those genetics as soon as I can, sooner rather than later. But it's no sin in buying bees to increase your numbers, to come back from losses. But it's not sustainable, because the people that you buy bees from, the next time you call them to buy bees to replace your losses, they may have had some big losses too. I kind of can't say that I'm friends with, but I'm well acquainted with several commercial beekeepers that send bees to Almonds every year, take the bees back to South Mississippi, where we have a lot of bees. We have, well, most of our bees. We don't, compared to these guys, we don't have any bees, but to us, it's a lot of bees. But most of our bees are on the Gulf Coast in Mississippi. 2/3 to 3/4 of them at any given time are on the Gulf Coast. So I've developed relationships with some of these commercial beekeepers down there that have 25, 30, 40,000 colonies. And they bring bees back from Almonds every year. They break those bees down, because when they come back from Almonds, they are set to swarm. They are ready to rock, ready to roll out of the hives. And something has to be done, because these guys are getting them ready to go to a honey crop in North South Dakota, Montana, and Minnesota. They would never stay in the hive that long to go back up there, because they come back in 1st of April and they're not leaving until the 1st of May. So they got to break all these down, and they sell nukes and packages. They sell bulk bees to package producers. If you're buying a package, it's a pretty fair chance that that's where they're coming from. It's from almond bees, because there's lots of bees available and they got to do something with them, and it's better for the commercial beekeepers to sell them for $10 a pound and let the package producer get the profit off of them than it is to just dump them on the ground. They're getting something. So it's usually 15 a pound if you're buying package bees from them. But anyway, there's a lot of bees available to buy, but about 3 years ago, there were no bees available to buy. Everybody got hammered. The big commercial guys that I know down there, they just didn't have any bees to sell. They had to use all of their resources that came back from Almonds to split into their other hive, into all their empty hives. They had an 80% loss. So they had to, 80% loss, if you got 10 hives and you lose 8 of them, that's pretty bad. But if you got 20,000 hives and you've lost 16,000 of them, that means you got a job ahead of you. And they had to use their surplus bees rather than selling them to come back from their loss. Those guys operate in a sustainable way. we don't always see that because they're really big, and we think, well, yeah, they truck them all across the country and they have this opportunity. They buy tanker loads of corn syrup to feed them, and we think of all the bad things that they might do, that we might not agree with how they're doing it, but they're actually operating in a sustainable way because they don't have losses so big. They would have to have a 95% loss to not be able to come back from it before the honey flow. 80% loss, and they sent guys that had 20,000 colonies and came back with 4,000 colonies. They sent 20,000 colonies north to make honey, 1st of June. That is sustainable. Excuse me. Most of what I have learned beekeeping and apply to our beekeeping is just stuff that I kind of stole it from the commercial people that I have hung out with over the years because it worked for them. I just scaled it down so that it would work for me. Sometimes I had to tweak it quite a bit to make it work on a smaller scale, but it does. You guys can do the same thing. Even if you just have 2 hives in the backyard, you can be as sustainable as these big commercial guys that come back from an 80% loss. The worst loss I ever had was I lost 600 hives one year. It was a 50% loss. I had 1,200 and I lost 600. And we made a honey crop that year. Because the 600 that I didn't lose, about 400 of them were pretty good hives. 200 of them were marginal, but okay. Nothing I could split. But the 400 of them, I made up that 600. That kept the 400 from swarming. So all those bees stayed in the hive. And it gave me 400 or 600 colonies to put on honey flows. So we were actually not short as far as bees are concerned going into the honey flow. And how did I know to do that? These commercial guys. I had watched what they did when they had what I would consider a devastating loss. I'd watched what they had done to come back from it. And what they did is so simple that I've had to just kind of talk in circles here to make this last long enough to make you feel like that you got your money's worth, because it's only a matter of taking one and turning it into 4. If you can take one good hive, and turn that hive into 4 by the end of the summer, you'll never be out of business. And you'll never have to buy bees. Now, there are some skill sets you need to develop to do that, or you're going to have to open your pocketbook up a little bit. You can either buy mated queens to make your splits, or you can raise them, one or the other. I would suggest raising them, learning to raise queens on a small scale. You don't have to raise hundreds of queens to make a dozen splits. You just need 12, 15 queens. You can do that using a double screen board and divide, leave the old queen in the bottom, pull all the young bees up to the top, or you can do it vice versa. You just need the queen separated from the young larva, and allow them to make queen cells. Cut the queen cells out, use those to make splits. For every queen cell, you're going to need 2 to 3 frames of bees, so make sure you got bees enough to do this when you're raising these queens. But you can make your splits at the same time. You can take your big hive, split it into 3, and cut queen cells and put into the 2 that you split, 2 that you gain. You take one hive that's got 8 to 9 frames of brood, and always short the hive that you're taking them from. If this hive is sitting right here and you got, say, 9 frames of brood, leave 2 frames of brood in the one right here where it's sitting. The reason for that, it's going to catch all the foragers coming back in. You're going to need the majority of bees going into your splits because they're going to move a little bit, and they're going to have to develop their own foragers, their own field force. So you make them heavier with bees, the parent hive lighter in bees. So you've taken one hive, one good big hive, 8 to 9 frames of bees, and you've made 3 out of it. Maybe both those queens will come back if you put queen cells in them. The most sure way is to go ahead and buy a mated queen and put in there. So for $30 or $40, you've gained a hive rather than spending however much you would pay for a hive. You can raise queens the second round if you want to, but I'm pretty cheap, and I'm a pretty big advocate for having people learn how to raise their own queens, because that's part of what it takes to become sustainable in your own bee business and to relieve a lot of anxiety of losing a queen. So you keep doing this. When you make that split, say you make that split on April 15, and April 15, the brood cycle is 3 weeks. You double that, 6 weeks from April 15, you should be able to split every one of those if the queens come back, or especially if you put mated queens in there. 6 weeks from then, you should be able to split every one of those at least half. So you started out with 1, you went to 3. In 6 weeks, you should have 6. A couple of those are going to be dogs. It's just the law of averages. Either your queen didn't come back mated, or she came back mated poorly, or she's came back mated and didn't start laying early enough, and the bees all gravitated toward another queen that was laying better next door, whatever. But that is a formula for starting with your split in mid-April, and you go mid-May, mid-June. By mid-July, you've got a minimum of 6 to 8 hives just from that one hive. You hadn't made anything. That you can't make a honey crop and make bees at the same time doing that. What you can do is make that first split and then take 2 of those and use them to split again while you leave one of them to make honey. If you really need a honey crop, leave that parent hive to make honey and take these other 2 new splits and split them again in 6 weeks. You can split them, then you'll have 4 there, and your 5th one is making honey, and you won't miss the crop, not much, because if you're averaging things out, the average is that you're probably going to have 1 out of 10 hives swarm, whether you know it or not, and it's going to cut your honey crop down a little bit. So your average honey crop is not going to suffer that much by holding that 1 hive for production and using the 2 new ones to split. And you have already recovered 125% loss by doing that. You can sell the bees, you can keep the bees. I would suggest making a nuke out of 1 or making a nuke out of 2 and just keeping them. It's very beneficial to keep a nucleus colony for at least forever 4 or 5 hives that you have. And if you only have 8 or 10 hives, keep a nuke colony for every hive, because there's a laying queen in that nuke colony, and sometime during the year, you're likely to go out and find out your queen has been superseded. And you're going to be all stressed out. What am I going to do for a queen? Well, she's sitting right there in the nuke box right next to your hive. or you're going to have a hive that just is not performing. They should have been 8 frames of brood and 12 frames of bees by now, and they're half that size. They just haven't taken off. Well, do like everybody else does and blame the leader. Grab the queen and twist her neck off and put that nuke, just plug the whole thing, put the whole nuke into the slow growing colony, and you have solved the problem of a slow growing colony. If it's at the beginning of a honey flow, you'll make a pretty good honey crop from that. As the season goes on, add frames from those nukes that you have. When they begin to build out and you think, well, they're going to swarm if I don't do something, take a couple of frames of bees out, add to your other hives, some of your other hives. It'll make an average hive really good, and it will make a poor hive average or better. So all of these things are ways that you can come back from a loss, and the loss I'm talking about would be a catastrophic loss to most people. You got 10 hives and you've lost 8 of them. You got 2 left. Out of those 2, you've made 10 just out of those 2 hives, and you're holding 2 of them back, and that's the first split. You're holding 2 of them back for honey production. So that means you've got 8 hives here, and you're going to split them again just because it's fun to do. And you're going to learn to make bees. Yes.
I love what you're talking about. Can you help me with the timeline? So you mentioned April you can start this. That's prime. Tell me when you have the most success, and then when do we need to stop?
You will have the most success making splits or doing anything. I mean, everybody in the beekeeping world is a genius in April. I mean, you can do no wrong in April because bees will fix whatever mess you make. Nobody can do anything in August. So you start, usually where I live, we usually start 4th week of March to the 1st week of April. We can count on going wide open by April 15. We can count on that every year. And we still have a few days of cool weather after that, but no freezes, no frost. So we count on starting. We just make it tax day, easy to remember. So April 15 we start, and every 6 weeks you can double what you have without harming what you've already got.
It won't set the honey production back when you do the split?
Well, you're saving out 2 for honey production. You save out those 2 originals and just split the splits. And that's where your gain comes in. But the 2 that you save out, no, it won't really hurt the honey production that much on those 2, because chances are you're likely to have a swarm and lose the total production from that one, and the other one, it'll make okay. So every 6 weeks you can double what you have, but that can't roll on through the entire summer, because as soon as there stops being a good nectar flow or a good pollen flow, especially a good pollen flow, then it's going to get more difficult to make splits and to have the splits grow out. You can feed them like crazy, but once we get past the summer solstice, has a lot to do with daylight hours. Once we get past the summer solstice, you have about 3 weeks, maybe 4, that colonies will actually grow. They're willing to grow. And after that, they're going into winter mode. Bees begin to get ready for winter in August. And I see this every year raising queens, because every year I believe I can raise queens in August this year. And then every year in September, I tell my wife, when I want to raise queens in August, please tell me not to do it next year, because my success rate goes from typical cell builder I have, it has 72 cups, and I'll get 55 to 60 cells. I'm not the guy that has the perfect graft row or anything, but I'll get 50 to 55, 60 cells in April, in May, in June. In July, instead of 55 to 60, I'll get 40, 45. In August, instead of 40 or 45, I'll get 30, 35. It's not that I'm not making sales, it's that I'm not making the production that I should. I'm not getting the return for my labor that I should be. So, another thing that I notice is this happens in two circumstances when you're raising queens. One is when your cell builder begins to get a little bit old and, a little long in the tooth, a little old. The bees are old, getting old. Bees that are 1, 2, 3, 4 weeks old, they make good cells. The wax will be a bright yellow, the cells will be long, and they'll make good looking cells, especially 1, 2, and 3 week old bees. 4th week, they begin to decline a little bit, but bees that are older than that, the wax gets dark on the cells. It stops being a big long yellow cell and starts being a little bit shorter and dark brown, like brood comb. That means that the wax glands on those bees have atrophied. They've worn them out. They're not producing the wax for the cups, queen cells and cups. They're stealing it from other places in the hive. So that's why the wax gets dark. Well, that happens when you have old bees in your cell builder. It also happens when bees are not in the notion of raising queen cells. In late July, August, up to mid-September, unless we have a honey flow in September, up to mid-September, your queen cells are going to be shorter and darker because the bees they're not too hip on this raising a family thing anymore. They're ready to get ready. They're getting ready for winter. When you see queen cells in a hive that are short and dark, you can make the jump there to knowing that the bees have transitioned from being reproductive honey gatherers into winter bees. They're beginning to store fat in their body, not to feed other bees, or not to produce other products, but to feed other bees and feed themselves over the winter. So, shut this whole thing down by mid-July. Unless it's an emergency, don't waste your time trying to make nukes in August and September or October. Now, I'm really good at telling people this stuff, and I'm really terrible at following my own advice, because if you come to our house next October, you'll probably see me out there making a nuke. And when you come and ask me if that's a smart thing to do, I may not be that smart, but I am honest. I'll tell you, no, this is stupid. They'll probably die, but I just can't help myself. That's what I am. I like to raise bees, even if I know I'm killing them while I'm raising them. So I'm telling you, I'm like Dave, don't do what I do. Don't try to raise queens or nukes in August, September. Late July is kind of a wild card, depending on the weather, but probably late July too. We have a unique opportunity on my end of the state, because around the river there's some really good honey sources, nectar sources, in July, August, and September, and we move bees down there to make a honey crop. You can actually raise queens down there in August and September, just because there's a big honey flow going. When life is good, bees are ready to reproduce. But as soon as things turn south, nothing you do is going to make them make them do the right thing, do what you want them to do. They're going to revert to being winter bees. So rather than take the chance, we just let the bees make honey on the river, because if I've done my part of the job, I've got enough queens already set back to requeen everything that we've got and get ready to go back south after we take the bees off the river. So the other ways of getting bees are buying bees, and nothing wrong with that. If you want to make the fastest turnaround in numbers, find a way to get some bees that are coming out of almonds, because you'll buy a pallet of bees, 4 double deeps on a pallet. You'll buy that pallet of bees, and for every 8 hives, this is kind of the average that it seems like works out every year. For every 8 doubles that you buy, one of them's probably going to be dead because they swarm so much. Queen didn't come back, whatever. One of them's probably going to be empty, or they might as well be empty. They just don't realize they're dead yet. No brood, no queen, no hope for anything. Just a few bees in there. Those other 7, you can immediately turn those other 7 into 35. You can probably take 4 from each one and leave the parent there, and 4 nukes, because they will just be packed with brood, and they're great bees. They're ready to reproduce. They're ready to make a honey crop. They're easy to work with, by and large, and they're not that expensive. You can usually buy a double deep for around $200, anywhere from $180 to $200. And when you're dividing that into 4, when you're making 4 out of that one double deep, that makes a pretty cheap hive, $50 for a good nuke. Of course, you got to have a queen for it too. You won't have any trouble with that because they're going to be full of queen cells when they get here. That's the quickest way to make a fast turn on recovering your losses. They're not diseased. They're not poisoned by chemicals that have been in. The orchard growers are very particular about spraying while bees are in the almond orchards, and they have what's called a release date. And when they give you the release date, you got to get the bees out of that orchard. Then you have 7 days to remove them. Usually, the growers we've worked with, you have 7 days to remove them. And the reason you only have that window is because they're going to start a spraying program. As soon as you get the bees out of there, they won't spray. Most of them won't spray with bees in there, so your bees aren't poisoned. They're great bees, but that's still not sustainable. The only sustainable way is knowing how to take one and turn it into 4 or 5. And extrapolate that over the season. You don't have to turn it into 4 or 5 this week. Just before the end of the year, if you can make that one 4 or 5, then you won't be out of business. That's the business model for the guys that depend on their bees for their house mortgage. That's what they do. And they don't have a copyright on it. Anybody can do that, and it's very simple to do. Once you have made a split, or once you have made a nuke, you'll wonder why you've been paying money for them for so long. Did you have a question?
No, I was saying, I was just thinking.
Oh, you were just saying amen? Or yeah. Okay.
I figured out you can make your own nukes.
Yeah, make your own. But that's the best advice that I can give you. And coming back from losses also means you need to know why you lost them. And when you figure out why you lost those bees, try not to do that again. I've had some self-inflicted losses over the years, and I've had some losses that just kind of fell on me over the years, and there's no excuse for either one. Be aware of what's coming, be aware of what's here, and be aware of how to deal with it, how to respond to whatever's coming. Right now, make sure your bees are as clean from varroa mites as possible. Use the opportunity in the spring while it's cool to treat with formic acid. You don't have to use a full treatment. A half treatment will work. But the reason you treat with formic acid is because formic acid is 100% effective against tracheal mites. So you will not have tracheal mites in a hive even with a half treatment of formic acid. It's also pretty effective against varroa mites, and it works through the cappings. So it usually shuts down the queen for a day or 2 or 3. You count forward 25 days and treat with oxalic. And if there's no cap brood or very little cap brood, that'll give you a pretty good cleanup. That's a spring treatment. And
is that because the formic will shut the queens down?
That's because the formic will shut the queens down. There's other things that you can do that are, if you just have less than 100 hives, you can do some of these things that are pretty cool management practices that I just can't get it done. I'm overweight, but I'm not a big beekeeper. We've got 1,600 hives, but we don't have a crew that works them. There's 3 of us guys that work 1,600 hives, and once in a while we'll hire somebody to come along and be a step and fetch it for us. But one of the things that you can do, and all of it involves a brood break. Brood breaks are a valuable tool. If you're going through your hives and in the spring and you see a hive that has some European foul brood or some sac brood or something wrong with the larva, if you will take powdered sugar and sift powdered sugar over all of the brood frames, just the brood frames, put them back in the hive, the bees will remove all of the larvae and all the eggs. That's going to give you a 10-day window to treat with oxalic in 14 days. 14 days because drones are under the cappings, are in the pupal stage for 14 days. There's not going to be any larvae or eggs in there to come on after that. So 14 days you can treat with oxalic, and you can get a pretty clean varroa kill. Plus it cleaned up that. I wouldn't do that if the brood was totally healthy. I wouldn't want to do that. But if you've already got a brood issue, you're removing the host, so the pest is removed. Most of the pest pathogens that cause brood problems can't survive without that host for more than 3 or 4 days. And they're not going to have a host for at least 3 days, because 3 days is an egg if the queen starts laying the next day. So it won't cure all the problems, but it will give you a big leg up on brood diseases and on varroa mites. It's a good way to get a brood break if you only have a few hives. Yes, sir.
Are you talking about sprinkling the powdered sugar on the wax, or just across the top?
No, on the wax. Take the frames out, lay the frame down, sprinkle it over where it goes down in the cells. You're wanting that powdered sugar to contaminate those larvae and eggs. That will cause the bees to remove all of that. But that's in a sick hive that you do that. That is kind of a home remedy version of using an antibiotic for European foul brood. Yes, sir.
In the spring, how long do you leave the formic acid on?
Week.
1 week.
1 week.
Okay, and then you count 23 days from the first day you put it on?
25 days from the first day. Yeah.
Because that takes care of any drone that
Yep.
could have been in there and hatched.
Yeah, drones should all be gone on day 24.
Okay, but you remove the formic acid after day 7.
Yep.
When does the queen start laying again?
She'll usually start laying before you ever remove it.
Okay.
If you're just using one Formic Pro pad, she'll usually start laying within 4 days or 5.
But that 25th day, you're not going to have any capped brood.
That's right.
You'll have open brood.
You'll have open brood, no cap brood.
Okay, thank you.
And oxalic is effective with that. So you've got a formic treatment that is more than one purpose, tracheal mites plus varroa mites. Then you got a backup oxalic treatment. Rather than putting the second formic pad on after a week, if you just wait 25 days and treat with oxalic, you'll get just as effective treatment.
About what time do you do this formic treatment?
I usually do it where I live, last week of March, first week of April.
Before the flow?
Yeah, we usually have a little flow by then, depending on how mature the canola is. We will for sure have a dead nettle and henbit flow by then, but it's not anything you're going to put Superzone for. But even at that, both of those products you can use with Honey Superzone. So it won't contaminate the honey at all.
Now, that's 25 days after you put the pad on, or 25 days after you remove the pad?
After I put it on.
Okay.
If you put the pad on March 1st, then on March 26th,
Then do the OA.
do the OA.
And you're only doing 1 round of formic in the spring.
1 round of formic in the spring, OA, 1 round of OA. Then I treat with formic. I don't care how hot it is.
You don't have queen kills? Or?
Nope. As far as I know, I've not had a queen kill. But I put this is a caveat to that. I put a deep super with empty frames on top of the top super in the hive, and I put the formic pad on top of that.
Does it fall down?
Formic acid falls through the hive, but that extra room is enough buffer that it's not so harsh on the queen.
So you're putting it on top of the super.
Yeah, on top of that top box. Yeah,
So if there's a buffer between the
Right.
box and...
right.
Can you put so do you never put the formic pad directly on top of the brood chambers?
Oh yeah, that's a spring treatment.
Okay.
Spring and fall treatments. Well, cool weather treatment
Cool weather.
is directly on top of the cluster.
Okay, but summertime, if you have super
Hot summertime, it's in the very top. Yeah. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Now, if you did the splits, like you suggested, would you skip the Formic Pro and just wait the 25 days and do the oxalic acid because you wouldn't have any larvae?
If you make the split, you're going to have a brood break in there, because especially if you put a queen cell in it, you're going to have a brood break of about a week there. So you're right. I would skip the formic treatment and just treat with OA when I put the cell in, because you're going to get that natural brood break. But at some point during the year, I'm going to treat with formic. And that has to do with tracheal mites. It also has to do with, I just like to irritate bees, you know. That's my little gig, you know. You cause me a lot of consternation, so here, breathe this for a while. When you're using this stuff, use a mask. Use a mask that is rated for organic acid vapor. And they may be expensive, but the reason that I sound like I've got a cold is because I had a mask on. I treated with oxalic last week. I had a mask on and I took it off, of all things. I took it off to spit, you know, and and I don't even chew tobacco. I just had a lot of saliva in my mouth. But I did the mask like that, and I had my vaporizer laying on the tailgate of the truck, and the wind was blowing just right, and I got a little whiff of oxalic acid, and for just a brief moment, I felt sorry for varroa mites, because I thought, man, if that's what you guys are getting, I'm kind of sorry for you. And then I realized that I'm not going to die, and I hope that y'all are. I'm not that sorry for varroa mites, but wear all the protection you're supposed to wear. Be safe about it.
What's your reason for not just doing the other half of the formic and be done?
Because the oxalic will give a good kill without taking any chance. And oxalic is cheaper than formic too, but it'll give a good kill without the possibility of anything going wrong with the queen. Even though I've never lost a queen to formic, I'm quite aware that I could. It could very well happen. And you know, it's amazing that we don't lose more queens than we do, because almost anything we do in a hive has the possibility of causing queen loss. If you disrupt a hive and the wrong bee has a little fit and spreads some alarm pheromone and the queen walks through it, she's dead. If she gets alarm pheromone on her, she is done. They'll kill her. So, you know, it's and just because you can't smell bananas when you're working a hive, that don't mean there's not alarm pheromone there. Their sense of smell is way better than ours. So, you know, it's kind of amazing to me that we don't lose more queens than we do. We put a mite treatment in, the queen walks across it, gets a lot of that smell on her. All of a sudden, she don't smell like the queen that's supposed to be in that hive and gets superseded. Things like that happen. A lot of times, it's not our fault. It just happens. So
And bees don't read books.
Bees don't read books. And, you know, the people that write books and do the research are such an important part of this industry, because that's where we learn everything. We read all this stuff, then we go to a hive and try to find it, try to look and see what we've read. But there's also an important thing to remember. But for the most part, the people that write books make their living selling books. They don't make their living keeping bees alive. So just because they say this is how to keep bees alive and your bees will never die if you do this, kind of take that with a grain of salt. I don't write books because I've said that same statement too many times. So I'm not gonna write a book, but I try to keep bees alive, and that don't always work either. I have to replace bees every year. We've lost about out of our Mississippi bees, we lost about 2%, which is almost nothing. And those went to almonds. Out of our Kentucky bees, we've lost about 20%. Some of them, it was operator error, meaning I didn't get back out there and put feed on them, and some of them ran out of feed. Now, I have what I consider to be a legitimate excuse for not getting out there and doing it, but I don't care how legitimate my excuse is, it don't make those bees not dead. They're just as dead as if I didn't have an excuse. So we lost about...
That's just free equipment.
Well, that's the way we look at it. I mean, I had a guy that was helping me. He was driving me around because I couldn't drive. And from September 7th until about 3 weeks ago, no driving, you know. And so he was driving me around. He's a beekeeper too. And he said, "Boy, this is terrible. You got a bunch of empty equipment out here." And I said, "No, this is great." He said, "Great." I said, "I got stuff to split into now." I said, "What if all of these hives had been just booming, and what would we have done then?"
Building boxes.
We'd have we'd have had to go to the barn and get a bunch of new equipment and go put frames together. I said, this is great, man. He said, you know, you're kind of sick. I said, yeah, I hear that all the time. You're not shocking me by that, man. But that's the truth. As long as you're losing less than 50% of your bees, you can come back from that every single year and make a honey crop and have your same numbers coming back. So don't get despondent about losing bees. Don't beg for it, but don't get despondent about it, because I don't see anybody in here that I don't think has enough on the ball to make a split. I mean, I've seen some fellas that I wouldn't have give 5 cents for everything they knew that were pretty good at making splits. Maybe better than me even, but
They just got good at it after they had to replace bees all the time.
that's what they did. You know, they made splits. I mean, they might not could have hit the tea glass pouring tea in it, you know, but they could make splits. And so it takes me about 15 minutes to make a split. I've timed this out every way that I've ever known of making a split or making a nuke, either one at the synonymous. Those are synonyms. And I have shaken the bees down into the bottom box, pulled larvae, uncapped brood, up into the top box, put a queen excluder between them, and come back the next day. And that's really quick. But then I come back, and you have to give them time for the bees to come up to feed those larvae. And you come back, take however many frames you're wanting to make a split with out of there, and make your split, make arrangements for a queen, take the queen excluder out, go on about your business. That's one way. And that seems really quick. Or you can search for the queen, find the queen, move the queen, you know, make your split that way, move the frames brood. And both ways, if you add up all the time involved, it takes me about 15 minutes. And I've had people that work for me that were quicker than that. And I've had people that work for me that did a really good job. Those weren't the same people. You can be quick or you can be good, but it's hard to be quick and good at that. The reason I started shaking the bees down is because more and more I'm finding 2 queens in a hive. And I've found 2 hives that had 3 queens in them. Coexisting, all laying eggs. I don't know if they were sisters or just good buddies, I don't know. But that's why I shake them down, so that I know that I'm just getting 1 queen in this nuke. The danger of putting 2 queens in a nuke, one of them could take half the bees and fly off in a swarm. 1 queen in a nuke, 1 queen in a split. If there's already 2 queens existing in there, you're good to go. I mean, they're probably going to live out their days in there. So that's how we make splits. We feed every split, every one. Don't put protein in it. Small hive beetles, if you have small hive beetles, don't put protein inside the hive. But feed them a light sugar syrup and a trickle feed. You don't feed them all they'll take. Don't put light sugar syrup in a Boardman feed, or not a Boardman, but a division board feeder. Put it in something that has a couple of tiny holes, like 1/16 inch holes. When I'm using a nuke box, I just use a pop bottle, 20 ounce, 16 ounce pop bottle. Put a couple of 1/16 inch holes in it. Just stick it in the top of that nuke box. We bore holes. We use migratory lids. We bore holes in our migratory lids, and I have cannon lids that I've drilled a hole in where I can swing it over it and cover that hole up. I can swing it back. I can either set a bucket on it or I can set a pop bottle in it. Either one. And those are good, cheap ways of feeding your bees the right thing at the right time. And that'll make your splits take off a lot quicker. You want to make sure they have food just in case it starts raining for a week and they're sequestered in the hive. You don't want them to starve in that hive. Or you don't want them going backwards. Don't ever let bees go backwards in the spring. They can go backwards in November. That's okay. It's time for them to go backwards, not in the spring. Keep them moving forward. Keep them fed. We feed pollen sub in an open feeder. It's a nuke box, a pro nuke box with the ends off of it, and we just set it on a 55-gallon barrel and dump 5-6 pounds of pollen sub in it. Let the bees find it. When they need it, they'll find it. Those are not secrets. They're just stuff that we do. But it works for us. It keeps us in business. Does anybody have any questions? Yes, sir.
Any idea what percentage of those hives you're finding dual queens in?
I don't really keep a solid number on it, but I'd say about 30%. About 3 out of 10 will have more than one queen. Yeah.
And that's one's coming out of winter.
That's any hive, anytime. Yeah. The only ones I can be kind of sure of are the ones I've made up, where I know that there's only one queen in them. Yeah. We have a beekeeper school at our house every year. It's April 23rd, 24th, and 25th this year. Don't cost nothing. We feed you real good. We're working in live hives of bees. It's all hands-on stuff. And you get to do and see whatever you want to do and see in a hive of bees. I'm hoping I won't be able to show you any American foul brood or anything like that. But I'll almost guarantee you that I can show you some sac brood, maybe some European foul brood. When you got 200 or 300 hives in one place, there's almost always somebody is sick, just the way it is. So you get to catch queens, get to mark queens, get to graft queens, get to start the process raising queens, whatever you want to do. We're going to make splits, we'll do hive inspections, and we'll do some other fun stuff too, beekeeping stuff. So y'all show up.
What were the dates again, please?
April 23, 24, and 25.
Highly recommended.
Thank you, Kent.
Thanks.
Welcome.